Sierra asked a question yesterday with regards to a certain part of the form. It's a certain section on the online application form that asks your usual country of residence. And it's a common question. You know, people ask, Martin, particularly for those that are onshore. Okay, normally this pops up, or people are uncertain on how to answer this question when they're here, where it asks for their usual country of residence. And they say, Martin, do I put the Philippines in this instance, or do I put Australia? What is my usual country of residence? Now, there isn't, with respect to this form and what we're applying for, which is an onshore partner visa, there isn't a legal definition that we would work off to answer that question. You know, whether Australia or the Philippines is your usual country of residence really depends on what you feel is your usual country of residence. Typically speaking though, so therefore you could say either. And sometimes we say Australia, and sometimes we'll say the home country. Generally what we might look for as a determining factor with regards to whether we're putting the Philippines or let's say Australia as an answer there is the person here on a long-term visa? You know, are they here on a student visa, have been here for a few years studying, and are now applying for a partner visa? Or for all intents and purposes then, currently, their usual country of residence is Australia. Whereas if someone's here perhaps on a visitor visa or short-term stay, I've only been granted 3 months, you know, in their period of stay and are applying for a partner visa within that 3 months, I would probably say the more appropriate answer would be their home country, because that's still their usual country of residence, but they are in the process of migrating to Australia, given that they're now here applying for a partner visa. So point is, it doesn't really matter what you put in this form. You have, in this part of this form, you have to declare your travel history, your residential history in various parts of the application process anyway. Being the actual application form, there's another section where you declare your history, your residential history, and also Form 80s for those who are attaching Form 80s. So don't overthink this question, but I suppose a guiding principle is if you're here on a long-term visa, something more than a year or so, you can put Australia. If you're here on a short-term visa, anything less than a year, then maybe it makes more sense to put your home country as your usual country of residence. Sierra's mentioned that the more she checks her answers, the more confused she gets. And, you know, that's understandable. And part of the process, unfortunately, of preparing a partner visa is that there's a lot of ambiguity in a lot of parts of these forms. And people often overthink what's being asked and are really fearful that they're going to make a mistake, a critical, irreversible mistake that's going to lead to a partner visa refusal. And I'll tell you now, guys, you know, you have to make some pretty critical errors in the form for an entry on a form to lead to a visa refusal. And really, as a kind of broad brush definition, what they're looking for is misleading information, you know, fraudulent information that relates to the partner visa criteria, such as you misleading the government about the day you married. You know, you're saying we married 5 years ago, but then you attach a marriage certificate that says you only married a year ago. Well, that's could be deemed misleading. You're trying to claim you've been married for 5 years, but in fact, when you provide the actual official marriage certificate, it only says a year. Obviously, that's an extreme example. Most people should know their correct marriage date, but I'm just trying to give you some context. You know, when it comes to declaring periods of stay in countries, so where you've been, where you've lived, where you've worked, it's very common for people not to know all those answers and not to know the specifics of that information. And that's not going to, on its own, lead to a visa refusal. You just have to answer things as accurately as you can, but don't overthink things too much. And at the end of the day, if anything's unclear, that's what this Facebook group is for. That's what the ongoing support is meant to provide you, is an opportunity to ask questions and get clarity. And I can give you some perspective on, is this actually important, or is this not that important, and don't worry about it. Focus more on your relationship documentation. So Sierra, look, understandable you're getting confused, but don't worry, you're on the right track. But if you have more questions, please feel free to ask in the group.